This is episode 3 of our Despite My Anxiety series. Over the last couple of weeks, we have been hearing from women who have lived with and experienced different forms of anxiety. And we have been hearing about the things that they are doing in their life, in their day, despite anxiety. This series has been truly inspirational, and I have learned so much from listening to everybody who has been on so far. Today, we have one final special guest, Dr. Sascha Kowalenko. Sasha is a clinical psychologist with a special interest in supporting women, children, and families through her business, the Silver Lining Collective. Sasha's practice is infused with many years' professional experience and her lived experience as a working mum of 4. She is deeply committed to impacting generational change by empowering women, in particular with the knowledge and skills to optimize their mind, body, and spirit. This is Inspired Wellness with Jessica, a safe space for women impacted by their emotions to unlock hope and discover ways to elevate emotional wellness holistically for long-term health and well-being. I am your host, Jessica, advanced EFT practitioner, holistic counselor, meditation therapist, and advanced life coach. Join me for real, raw conversations to educate and inspire you to take control of your emotional well-being. I am so grateful you are here with me. Let's dive straight in. Sasha, welcome to Inspired Wellness with Jessica. It is an honor to have you here today.
Oh, Jess, it's likewise an honour to be here today. So thank you for having me and to your audience for letting me into their lives for a little while.
Absolutely. And if
Mm.
you are listening, you will not regret letting Sasha into your life for a little while. She is a beauty full of wisdom and knowledge. And I introduced you just before the beginning of this episode. But Sasha, would you like to share with listeners, a little bit more about you, maybe a bit of a story of how you got to where you are?
Yeah, it's a big question, isn't it, Jess?
It
I
is
always feel a
very,
bit
very
overwhelmed.
open-ended one.
And I must apologise. I have a tendency to go out off on tangents. So pull me back in if I'm blabbering on.
I love the tangent.
Um, um, I guess lately, not always, but lately I've been leading with that. Probably first and foremost, I'm a mum. I've got 4 little ones. My eldest is 10, and my youngest is 3. So very much still in the thick of parenthood, motherhood, matrescence. Starting to move into parenting a preteen, which is a whole another ball game as well. So that's, I guess, my
Scared of that?
yes.
I'm scared of it.
It has been quite interesting, or is very interesting and very challenging, and probably has a thread related to my own anxiety actually too, which I've been
Mm,
thinking a lot about. So I can, if we get time, I can share on that as well.
absolutely.
So that, I guess, that's my family life is very much devoted to my kids, but also then that has implications for my life more generally. Before kids, I was and continue to be. I practice as a clinical psychologist, and that work has always drawn me into the family wellbeing space of work. So that's supporting everybody that exists in a family. And I know that sounds really broad, but I've done a lot of adult mental health work, but I also work a lot with kids individually. But often that work, more often than not, my practice is in supporting parents and supporting other people that are in a child's network to support those kids rather than it being just about me, and certainly not about me as a therapist. So very holistic in my approach to supporting kids, but also knowing the I guess the multi dimensional but directional nature of relationships as well, and that we can't think about kids without thinking about parents, and parents without kids, and
Mm,
families without all those individuals, and how our own states of mind, stress, emotions impact each other mutually. So that's when I say holistic, it's thinking about all of those influences, I guess,
yeah.
and
All the
also
moving
the
parts.
all the moving parts,
Yeah.
exactly, Jess. And I just had a session with a young girl, actually a younger woman, this morning, and drew exactly that diagram of a number of circles of life that overlap, and that it's not just one thing that's the struggle, it's how all those things are connected and how we can tease
Mm.
things out. And so yeah, so that's sort of my professional space. I have my own small practice in Brisbane where I consult a couple of days a week, but I'm also really driven to try and, through that work, but through, I guess, other things that I've been thinking about in terms of making an impact in the world and on a generational level, in trying to, ideally prevent or at least minimize the prevalence that we have of mental health challenges in the
Mm.
community by really supporting people, equipping particularly women, which is my jam, I suppose. Supporting women to be able to have the skills and knowledge, confidence to be
Mm.
able to look after themselves in the way that they deserve, not just that they need or want, but what that they deserve as human beings. And I know the impact, the ripple effect that that has then on the world. So that's my bigger mission, I suppose. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, I just got goosebumps when you're talking about that. It is going to make an impact and it is already making an impact. It's such a beautiful mission because there is so much confusion and misinformation around mental
Yes.
health. And I think still a lot of a stigma and a lot of shame for people who
Yes.
experience it as well. And that's why
Yes.
I love conversations like these where we can chat, openly and honestly and uh, rawly is not a word.
Yeah. No, it is. Yes. Yes.
Rawly
Rawley, I think
works.
so. Yeah, I use it anyway.
We'll have raw, and have raw conversations.
Yes. Yes.
It's
Let's just
Monday.
take
Can
it
I
out of the
use that as
equation.
an excuse? I feel like my brain doesn't work any day. Yeah, and have these beautiful raw conversations with people who are brave enough to share what they are going through. Because, if you are somebody experiencing something, mentally that's impacting your life, it's impacting your body, your emotions, any part of
Yes.
you, it's okay. It's okay because we're human.
Yes. And Jess, this might sound potentially a bit controversial, or even not make much sense, but as a clinical psychologist, which is my training, the more I practice, and maybe there's an age component, maturity component as well, is I'm moving further and further away from those definitions of mental illness, to be honest. And because I feel like, to some degree, that even labeling when we have challenges in our mental, psychological, emotional space, it pathologizes them just by the definition. When, as you just said,
Mm,
Jess, much of what we experience, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes label as particular conditions, are, well, a number of things that, as you said, they're part of being human,
mm,
and it's normalizing the experience of being human, and what that looks
absolutely.
like and feels like. Um, and then I lost my train of thought about what my second thing was, because something beeped on my computer and I lost what my second thing. So it's yeah, it's normalizing, and I guess then it will come back to me. So you ask me the next question, and I'm sure it will drop in.
No, that's okay. I think, well,
Mm.
what I wanted to ask you next was, I guess I wanted to ask you a little bit about your experience with anxiety. And I would love to hear as much as you'd love to share from both a personal perspective, because you are a successful business owner, a wonderful mum of four. So you have your story with your anxiety.
Yeah.
But if you want to throw in any clinical psychologist
Yes. Yes.
perspective
Yes.
as
Yes.
well, then
Yeah.
I would really love to hear that too. So, are you happy to share with our listeners a little bit about what your experience with anxiety has been like?
Yeah. And again, thank you for creating the space to be able to have these conversations, Jess, and for me to share. When I was thinking about what I would say in this space, I guess, again, like I said in the intro, there's probably so much that I can say. So
Mm.
when I look back now, and I know that this would probably be a very common experience, particularly of people, of women my age, I'm hoping that it's different these days. I know that it is different to some degree. But when I look back at my experiences in the early part of my life, I would now label them as being anxiety. But at the time, I had no concept of what those things were. And I think for me, and this is something I'm always teasing out with clients as well, so I'm very mindful of it because it has been my experience, is that for me and my story growing up, there's certainly, as there is for everyone, a real interaction between my temperament, my personality, my biology, just how I was
Mhm.
born, and where I sit, I guess, on the continuum in terms of things, um, like introversion and extroversion, risk taking, impulsivity, comfortability in certain situations. And I very
Mhm.
much sit on the end of the continuum around that sort of introverted, quieter
Mhm.
space. And my parents would endorse that from a very young age. I was very happy by myself, doing my own thing, quite introspective in that regard.
Yeah.
So that's sort of who I was as a person. So I wouldn't have said then I was anxious, but I was certainly sort of more of a shy.
Mm.
um, but interestingly, and I still feel this now, and I'll probably come back to this, that it didn't stop me doing things. And what I mean by that is that, one thread of that is in terms of my growing up story, I moved around a lot with my parents' work. So that meant many new schools at sort of critical points in my life, multiple times in primary school and high school. So there was always those transitions of, starting
Mm.
a new school, making a new friendship group. And I think for me, it was those sort of experiences that exacerbated, or I can't think of another word, but
Mm.
compounded what was sort of my tendency to be a little bit anxious. And
Yeah.
there's a family history of that as well, of then having to fit in and make new friendships and being put in those situations that were quite scary for me.
Mm.
So the short end of this story is, when I think about anxiety, for me, my anxiety exists in that social space, and it
Yeah.
has evolved across I would say, my late primary years, certainly into high school and
Yeah.
beyond, where, as I said, it was quite specific for me. So
Yeah.
I'm not risk taking, but I'm quite confident in going out and doing things. So, for
Mhm.
example, um, I traveled overseas by myself at 17. I've moved and lived by myself in, remote parts of Australia. So doing things like that
Mm.
doesn't bother me. But what did bother me was, in any sort of social situation, and by social, I don't necessarily mean a party. This would be at school, particularly at university. This is where it really, my sort of
Yeah.
mid early 20s, showed its head, and I didn't really even conceptualize what it was. But I would, in the sort of like tutorial environment where you have to do the introduction or speak in front of the group, I would literally be paralyzed with anxiety. What
Mm.
I would now describe, and what I now know, would be at the level of a panic attack. It wasn't obvious, but on the inside, I would be shaking, completely
Mm.
hyper aroused.
Yeah.
Even as I talk now, as I say what I'm going to say next, I would go bright red,
Wow.
um, and find it very hard to talk. I would still talk, I would still do what I had to do, but I would have,
Mm.
of course, all this negative dialogue. What do people think about me? I can't speak properly. Look how red I am. They're going to think I'm this and I'm that. I would be having those thoughts in the lead up to those situations.
Mm.
And then I would have beating myself up after those situations, which would make subsequent situations hard.
Yeah.
And so it
Yeah,
goes. So
yeah, because
that's
then
sort of
you
what anxiety is for
associate
me.
that speaking with that awful feeling of panic that you had, so there's that
Yes.
assumption that your mind could be making that it's just gonna happen every time.
Yes. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then it would happen every time, because
yeah,
I'd this was a well rehearsed cycle,
yeah,
threads back to high school, where I can see it emerging.
yeah,
And then as I, moved into a university, and I think part of that was the expectations, what I was thinking other people were thinking about me.
mhm,
And this is to go off on a thread. What I know from a clinical psychology perspective, that what's at the core of social anxiety is a fear of being negatively evaluated by others.
mm, yeah,
Um,
and that's a survival instinct because we are born to
yes,
belong,
yes,
you know,
yes,
back in olden day way back in prehistoric times, if we didn't have our tribe, if we were cast out from the pack of, you know, we wouldn't survive on our own.
exactly.
We wanna
Yeah,
belong.
yes.
Yeah.
And
Can I
then,
circle back
mm,
for a moment to something that you said,
yes,
when you were talking about preparing to speak? And I just want to circle back because I hear a lot of people say to me, and I also see in a lot of support groups as well when people are talking about their anxiety and their experiences with panic attacks, that they're saying, "Well, is this normal?" Has anybody else felt like this? So I just wanted to circle back to when you said that feeling of feeling paralyzed, the internal feelings that you were feeling inside your body, but you now know to be a panic attack. And I wanted to pause on that just for a moment to let anybody listening know that the panic attack can feel different for everybody.
Mm.
And what you experience when you're in that state is normal for you and it is safe because there are
Yeah.
ways that we can bring our body down from it.
Yeah.
But I just yeah, really wanted to highlight what you said that you felt like you were paralyzed because that's one I have heard people say a lot. I felt like I couldn't move, or I felt, it's that freeze response. I, I,
Yes.
I felt like I couldn't move, or I felt like I didn't have control over my legs or my arms,
Yeah.
and that's quite a frightening thing for people because is that normal? Is that normal?
Yeah.
And I wanted to
Yeah.
come back to it because yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, again, terrible vicious cycles that I guess what I know separate to social anxiety in my context, but there's multiple things that can trigger, and they're very different, that can trigger that sense of panic for individuals.
Mm.
And but what is common to that is once we're heightened or we're hyper aroused and we're in that state, the feelings are so strong, and again individual, but so strong that we feel a range of things, and think a range of things like, what is going on here? I'm going crazy. I am
Mm.
crazy.
Yeah.
I'm going to have a heart attack. I can't survive this. I'm
Mm.
going to die. So it's
It's
with
very doom. It's
it,
yeah,
it's and then
there's a
that's what's
sense of
common
doom.
to everybody. I
Yeah.
think regardless of the trigger, it's that sense that
Mhm.
this is not intolerable. But as you said, Jess,
Mm.
we're not
Yeah.
going to die. We will be able to survive this. We are safe. But
Yeah.
our brain doesn't distinguish
It doesn't, does
the
it?
difference
No, it
between the two.
absolutely
Mm.
doesn't.
Mm.
And I know I personally have experienced many panic attacks as well, and I know, that they are one of the most uncomfortable things that a person can go through for those reasons that you just described. Am I having a heart attack?
Mm.
Am I about to have a stroke? What is happening to me? Danger, danger,
Yes.
danger, I'm gonna die.
Yes. Yes.
And, triggered by standing up to speak in front of some people.
Yes.
Our brains
Yes.
are our brains are
Yes.
fascinating, aren't they?
Yes. 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 Yes.
Oh, thank you for sharing a little bit about how you've experienced anxiety. Have you found that that has continued with you as you have moved forward in your career and in your business?
Definitely, which might sound surprising, but it's still with me even as I go to do presentations like this or conversations like this. Jess, there is that increase in anxiety for me, but
Mhm.
I must say it has, and this is not by chance or just by time, but it has lessened as time goes on,
Yeah,
definitely. But as I said, that's a consequence of the things that I do and the things that I do, but the way that I think about it as well. And one of the
absolutely.
ways
You've
I
had
think
to do
about
the
it,
work. You've
I've had
you've
to do
done
the
you've
work.
you've had to
Yeah,
do the work. Yeah,
yeah.
and you'll probably keep doing the work just like
Well, I was just
we
going to say, yeah, exactly that. That it's part of doing that work is accepting that this is just me too. And I've
Mm,
had experiences in my life, both just who I am in terms of my temperament, my biology, but my life experiences that have created the person that I am and the reactions that I have. And yes, I have some capacity and a lot of capacity to influence those. But
mm,
but once I move in and I can do this as a daily practice in accepting and not beating myself up and feeling shameful,
yeah.
that I'm doing X, Y, and Z, but I'm still, suffering from anxiety or still
Mm,
triggered around social situations. I'm much more kinder to myself these
yes.
days. Yeah. And that,
I resonate with that, and I think it's beautiful that you can be in a space where you are experiencing things moving forward and then still able to help others as well. I think that's a
yes,
beautiful place to be.
yes.
Let's have a bit of a chat about some of the things that you have done in your life despite having anxiety. So you mentioned at the beginning, when you were a child, the anxiety didn't sort of stop you so much. You still went traveling, you've still done things. Can we dive into that a little bit more? Because I know and I've experienced it myself. Anxiety can take over really quickly.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, what is turning down a couple of social invitations or not going to the shopping center because you're fearful of feeling dizzy
Yeah.
suddenly turns into not leaving your home and a few weeks or months or even years have gone past.
Yes. Yes.
So I love hearing what people have done in their life, be it a simple task
Yeah.
or a massive thing,
Yeah.
despite having anxiety.
Yeah. Well, just I think it is just exactly what you said then. It's the little well, this is my take on that. The little things can seem very big,
Mm,
and the little things are what contribute to the big things in the long run. So it's the small steps often. Um, and I guess thinking about some of those big things, but at the same time, just acknowledging I feel like the small are just as important.
they are.
But I suppose more recently, no, so even just going back across the course of, say, my working life, if I just think about work, for example, is I've, despite all and my really strong physiological reactions, which are, have been very prominent in my life in
Mm,
terms of particularly the physically getting really flushed and blushing. I
mm,
feel it's a very, very strong reaction. I've, often been in positions where I'm leading other people, where I'm required to speak in front of big groups of people. Going and I facilitate training now for on a regular basis with big groups of people. Done university lecturing, these types of interviews, which are going. This is fine with for me just one on one. If I just keep that
mm,
in my mind, it's not anxiety provoking. But when you think about the reach
mm.
of doing podcast interviews, showing up live on social media, all of those things, I feel for me and my form of anxiety are really significant because
Mm.
they get to the crux of what I said I'm fearful about, which is negative evaluation
Yeah.
by other people. So putting yourself out in a public way, in a
Mm.
work, just because of the evaluation, full stop. But then there's a layer of the professional evaluation as well from
Mm.
colleagues and peers as well as the general community.
Yeah.
So I guess that's probably my first thought in that professional
Mm.
realm is, despite having this, what I said was quite paralyzing at times, I've continued with my greater, I guess, and it's changed over time, what the things that I've wanted to do,
Yeah.
that have often involved social situations.
Yeah.
Um,
You
and then,
found a way to move through those paralyzing feelings, those really intense, the flushes, the really intense things that are on in your body. You have found a way to move through those
yeah,
and to face those
yeah,
so that you can still do the things that you want to do in your life.
yes,
That's
yes,
amazing.
yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's ongoing and it's not one thing and it's not that thing, or there are
Mm.
those things in the moment, definitely, but it's all, this is where that holistic aspect comes in. It's all the things, it's how you manage, for want of a
Mm.
better word, your life
Yeah,
and the things
absolutely.
that you prioritize. And there's times where I haven't, season of life, I haven't been able to do those things as well. And that's why, particularly as women, we're vulnerable, um, around transitioning into motherhood, it being a ripe ground for all mental health challenges, but particularly anxiety, which is where
Yeah.
I acutely felt it when I had my first child. And interestingly, on that social level, that's when things, and I said about my daughter at the start, that emerge and continue to emerge. So it's, for me, it's not just thinking about work and those big sort of situations. I'm actually a little bit more comfortable than those say a mother's group
Mm.
or kids parties and things like that, where that those situations can be, triggering for me as well. So, but again, it speaks to coming back to what do I want to do, and what's the
Yeah.
values led behavior or action that I want, which is to have opportunities for my kids and to meet other people myself. So I'd put myself in those situations.
Yes.
It would often take a lot of effort and I would bail, times as well. And I feel like that's okay too, Jess. It's discerning, and that's probably where I've gotten to in my life. It's discerning, when
Yeah.
do I push and when do I
Yes.
go, no, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to stay
100%.
home tonight
Yep,
or
well,
today or to stay
that's
home.
almost a boundary, really.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
that's knowing that where to keep yourself within the boundaries that are going to keep you mentally healthy,
yeah, yeah.
really.
And I think it's also, I've been thinking about this a lot lately too. It's another layer, and this is sort of separate to anxiety in a way, but has fed it for me personally,
Mhm.
is honoring just who I am on a temperamental and biological level. That
Mm.
I am much more of a, I'm quite satisfied with my own company. It's just as poor as it can be at sometimes. I like introspective activities. And that's okay. That's
Mm.
okay.
Absolutely.
So long as I don't then use that as a crutch, I suppose, to again stop doing the things that I want to do in life. That's the gauge, I suppose.
Yeah, there's
Mm.
something that you said in that, that I just really wanna come back to for a moment for anybody listening, and that's the way you put it was values-led behavior. So, I encourage anybody who is listening, who may be feeling like you are stuck at home or feeling like the anxious thoughts are stopping you when you don't actually want them to be, pause just for a moment just to take a look at what you do value and what experiences you do want to have in your life, and just bring those into your awareness. Just
Yes.
start by bringing those into your awareness, because once you do, you will start to think about them a bit more.
Yep.
Write them down, revisit them,
Yep.
and use them even as something to connect to as a possibility of another way to experience your life.
Exactly, Jess. And I love that so much, in that I think what's implicit in what you said is, I think naturally what evolves from that reflection is you'll think, well, what I'd encourage, if it doesn't happen naturally, is what's the smallest little step I can take. And I think the first little step is entertaining, like you said, or opening up space to think
Yeah.
what's important to me, what do I value in my life, what gives me meaning. And once you get that sort of clarity, and then, well, how can I start to move towards that? And just the thinking is one step, or picking up your phone and sending a text message
Yep.
to a friend and having an exchange that way, if I'm putting it in this sort of social realm for
Yeah.
the minute.
Yeah.
And then that gives you a little boost. It literally gives you like a dopamine hit and a serotonin hit, all the things, oxytocin, all the things that we will make us not just feel happier or a little bit more joyful, but stronger, literally stronger,
Yeah.
more confident to be able to then entertain the next step and the next step.
Yeah.
Mm.
Beautiful. I love the way you've just explained that. It makes so much sense. And you're right, just that it's just one small step. One small step. You don't have to jump into, a birthday party or going out
Yes.
to even, coffee dates or anything in a social setting. You don't have to just jump straight into it. What's the one
Yes.
small thing that you can do? Would you be happy to share with us, Sasha, some of your favorite ways to support yourself when you have your anxiety?
Yes, and just so I probably circling back to what I said earlier, I think about the foundational things in terms of my life that help me just feel at my best. And I often
Mm.
share this really what I find as a helpful acronym. Sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful.
Yes. Okay. Say it
Which
fast 3
is
times.
yes, um, which is nests. That's NESTS. Um, So N stands for nutrition and hydration. E is exercise and movement. S is for sleep. T is time alone or with others. And then support.
Mm.
So one of the things that I do is intentionally and regularly do a bit of an audit of how am I tracking in that space, and not from the perspective of trying to beat myself up if things have fallen off in terms of what I like to do in those areas. But then if I am feeling a bit shaky, if I am feeling more prone to unhelpful thoughts and my body being dysregulated, I sort of do a check in there, because that will often, a lot of the answers will lie there. And then
Mm.
second to that, making sure that I pay attention to those things
Yeah.
as a foundation. As
I'm
the,
gonna pop that in the show notes if you're happy for me to do
of
that.
course,
Nest.
yes,
So
yes,
anybody who
yes,
didn't, you might be listening and walking at the same time or something.
yes,
I love that, because that just brings you back down to basics within yourself,
yes,
right
yes,
back to your foundational needs.
yeah,
And what a fantastic way to check in
yeah.
on what's going on for you.
because what I often, this is both personally and professionally, Jess, is that we're often trying to think ourselves or problem solve out of situations, particularly when we're really anxious, that is going against our neurobiology. It's going against what our body's telling us to do, or in pushing us towards. So we have to come back to just those basics, like you said, foundationals, make sure the base is solid.
Mhm.
And then we can do the thinking work and the planning work and the problem solving that we need to do in all aspects of life, but particularly as it comes to managing anxiety.
Absolutely.
Um, and so for me in that space, I'm very mindful. Again, it waxes and wanes, but I would say that I have a pretty solid awareness of my thoughts and how sneaky they can be, and
Mhm.
how when life events are unfolding, when things are really stressful, when those my nests haven't been attended to, that I'm more prone to those um, thinking about things in a negative way, a negative bias in terms of how I'm reading other people and
Yeah.
that side of things. So I pay attention to what my thoughts are telling me, but at the same time, I have a process. I have two pre-processes that I rely on, of either saying, "Oh, okay, there we go. There's my anxiety talking to me again," and just that process in itself can mean I can unhook from those thoughts
Yeah.
with practice, I must say.
Yes.
Or
You keep
some
mentioning practice, and practice is really key. It really is.
it is
Nothing happens overnight when it
no,
comes to anxiety management or anxiety relief.
no,
It really is finding what's working for you and then continuing to implement it. Also, at the times when you feel good as well.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Even more so, I would say, Jess.
Yeah.
Even more so, to be able to fill our tanks up, but in from a coping or well-being perspective in those times when we feel good, gives us a buffer when life is going to throw its curveballs at us, so that we've got
Absolutely.
things in the tank there.
Yeah.
So yes, I just try and be aware of the impact of those thoughts, unhook from them, and sometimes I will just talk to myself differently or challenge those thoughts in a more sort of traditional way, looking at the evidence, I guess, of how likely it is the thing that I'm worried about is going to actually happen.
Yeah.
But these days, I'm less likely to go down that path and just go, okay, here it is again. Thanks for paying a visit, and I'm just going to return to what I'm doing now, and that's a really important practice for me in the moment, is to ground back in
Yes.
to right now through my breath. That's my number one probably tool. Anchor into my breath
Yeah.
helps me calm my nervous system, and then be able to do what it is I need to do.
Yeah, breathing is it's such an amazing tool because it is something that we all have available to us. And, we all it doesn't take much to learn how to use your breath to support yourself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of free resources that you could chat to somebody like Sasha or
Yes.
myself, and there's a lot of ways that you can find out how your breath can support you in those times of anxiety. And it really is going to be one of your strongest tools. And it's
Without a
there
doubt.
everywhere that you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just that practice and that training, that
Yes.
practice again,
Yeah.
practicing how to, get those big belly breaths, how to use your diaphragm,
Yes.
what breathing techniques you might like, what works for you, practice, practice. And then the more you practice, the easier it is to actually get, back into that space.
Yes. And to do it under pressure.
Yeah,
Once you've
exactly.
practiced, and it's what you said earlier, Jess, about in the times when you're feeling good, making sure that you still practice as well.
Yeah.
And I know that sometimes there's often criticism, or breathing practices are dismissed, or I've just been told to take a few deep breaths. And
Mm,
I understand that. Um, I understand that it might seem so simple, and I'm not saying it's the only solution, but it has to be the foundational one in terms of starting to calm, and then we can think about the next steps.
absolutely.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I
And it
agree.
serves so many purposes, bringing yourself back into your body when you are in those heightened states, as well as, once you are engaging in that breath with that long exhale, and you're bringing in that relaxation response nervous system, and you're able to really, as you said, then allow your logical mind a chance
Yes,
to
exactly,
even come in and
exactly.
think, because when you're heightened, And I know we had this conversation the other day. Sasha talked me through, a rough time that I was going through. And we had this conversation, when you are heightened, as I think you put it, when your lid is flipped, you're not thinking logically, you can't think
Yes.
logically,
No.
you can't make sense of a situation, which is why often when we do flip our lid, you think, why? What was that even about? Or how did that happen? Or what am I doing? Why did I react that way? It's just not logical. And it also, helps us to feel like we're going crazy because our
Yes.
logical mind, it's actually not in control.
Exactly.
So if you can
Yep.
bring yourself back into your body using such a simple tool such as your breath, then absolutely you'll be able to then get control of your logical mind and you can start working through things that you need to work through. It's
Beautiful.
always with you.
Beautiful summary. I couldn't agree more, Jess. In your summary,
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
I
Spot
used
on.
to get quite offended when because I think it was said to me during times of panic, or just breathe,
Yeah.
or just take a deep breath. When you get a bit
Yes.
worked up and someone
Yeah.
says to you, take a
Yeah.
deep breath, and
Yeah.
you're like, actually, I want to punch you in the face for saying
Yes.
that.
I know, and that's why I
It's
thought
not
to say
helpful.
I acknowledge that, and I think it's because it's. But when you have the bigger conversation and you explain and people understand, this is my big thing for me as an individual, and then how I feel I can help others. It's through understanding. If you understand what's going on in your body, your brain, how they're connected, then it makes sense. And then that strategy has then got so much more power,
Absolutely.
and wait for you to implement it. And you, in the sense of waiting, like it's powerful. You can see that it's going to work, and you've got, and that then helps with the motivation for the practice and the consistency when you
Yeah.
get it, when you understand.
Absolutely. That
Yeah.
education is so important. I definitely agree with you there. That's one of my big drivers as well, is really helping people to understand
Yeah.
so that they know how and why it is actually going to help them. Because
Yeah.
as adults, we're more likely to actually implement things if we understand why it's going to benefit you.
Yeah. And it's not the only solution or answer, but I do, in my experience, I find that for so many people, just that understanding piece, that education piece
Mm,
helps so much. Like it takes, and that's probably one of the things that and I know that I'm sure other people feel this, Jess, is that when you're in the grips of anxiety in whatever way it shows itself, you can feel very alone, and you
mm.
feel like no one else understands this, nobody else experiences this. Right, that's why we think we're crazy, because we feel
Yeah,
like we're the only ones. And
absolutely. And it
that's
adds
why,
that another layer of fear when you're going through that as
yes,
well.
yes. So that's why forums like this and conversations like this, as you said at the start, are so important, so that you know you're not alone.
Yeah.
You're not a freak. You're not crazy. It's your
Yeah.
body doing what it's been has evolved to do.
Absolutely. It just hasn't adapted to our modern day world where
Exactly. Exactly.
where a set of
Exactly.
traffic lights or an email or something
Yes.
can set
Yes.
off that
Can
same
set us off.
response.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Um, I would love to know, just as we start to wind up our conversation, do you have a message for listeners who are struggling with anxiety? What would your message be for them?
Maybe it's what I just said, Jess, is
Mm,
know deeply that you're not alone. And the person, and I think I'm a case in point, I hope that part of that message has been shared today, is I probably don't look like I've ever had anxiety or have anxiety. I don't think. I often get the comment that you're so calm and da 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 da. And there is a part of me that's like that, but there's also a lot going underneath the
yeah,
surface, or there has been. So you just don't know what the person next to you is experiencing. And with that in mind, what am I thinking? What does that mean? I guess it's to seek help, to seek information, to be vulnerable, and then to take like I said earlier, the smallest steps.
yeah,
Don't feel like you have to, and this is, I guess it's a term from psychological therapy, which is, this idea of graduated exposure. So gradually exposing ourselves to the things that we're most fearful of doing, and that might be walking into a party by yourself with
yeah,
nobody that you know. We
yeah,
don't start with that. Start with, like I said earlier, maybe sending a text message,
yeah.
and then with that we'll grow confidence. And I think that model applies across, or that framework applies across all forms of anxiety. So just do a small step and be brave, be brave.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, that's a beautiful message. I had to have a little giggle. I have listeners can't see, but Sasha's beautiful little girl was putting a pen a pen across the computer camera, and I just had a little giggle. She's beautiful.
Yes, she's quietly destroying my desk as we speak and trying to climb out the window.
I can understand that. That's normally Amelia and I when we're having meetings. She's climbing all over my desk and I'm sitting there trying to focus, going, "Oh my God, put it down, don't rip that." It's just the joy, isn't it? And the reality of us working mums.
Yes,
Really,
yes,
it
yes.
is.
It
and
is
the,
totally.
and I hope that it's okay that I brought it up, because I just,
It
I feel that so many of us are in this situation. We work from home, or we have things that we've got to try and do at home, and we've got our little people, and we feel like we have to, be in this perfect world, but
yeah,
it's okay.
yes,
He's
yeah.
gorgeous.
Thank you.
How can people work with you?
Jess, I'm sort of in a bit of, I've got, I guess, two streams of availability, and I think you'll probably link my socials and my website. So I have my clinical practice, which is the Silver Lining Collective. So that's seeing me, I guess, as a clinical psychologist, generally in a one-to-one format, which I don't have a lot of availability, but I have some spaces opening up over the rest of the year. But I'm also sort of moving more into, like I said earlier, trying to reach more people, women particularly, in very much like you were just saying, actually, in circumstances like us that can't always get to appointments or access help. Or what I also find is women, people in general, but women is my focus, accessing help when they've fallen off the cliff, or that they're at the edge of the cliff, in terms of having struggled for years and years and years, or all of their life with these types of experiences. So through my different second business, which is just under my name, so Dr Sascha, on Instagram and website, is trying to, I guess, educate, provide this information to a wider audience. And so I've got various different modalities there that are online, some group retreats as well. So best to just go to my website, and two websites, and you'll see the different ways there.
Well, I will link it all in the show notes.
Thanks,
Sascha, it has been a pleasure speaking to you today. I really am so grateful for your time and your beautiful energy and your presence. Thank you for being here.
Likewise, Jess. Everything that you said, I would say back to you. It's you've created a space where I've been able to be my true self, and that's very special. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Inspired Wellness with Jessica. If you enjoyed and found value in today's episode, then please help it to reach others who may also benefit by subscribing on your favorite platform and leaving a review. This would mean the world to me. To get in touch with me, inquire about working privately, or experience one of my online programs, then head to www.inspiredlifecollective.com.au, and I will see you on the next episode.